You're being cheated on and you don't even know it. Listen to this story. Human beings are by nature builders of worlds, and of all the structures we construct in our short existence, a romantic relationship is perhaps the most ambitious, the most sacred, the one we promise to protect from the chaos of the universe. It is our pact of stability, our refuge against uncertainty. But what happens when certainty reveals itself to be the greatest and cruelest illusion of all? What philosophical tool, what armor of the mind can withstand the brutal impact of betrayal, deception, infidelity? Today we step into the most intimate and universal torment, the fracture of trust. This is the epic and heartbreaking story of a man who believed his love life was secure. A man who, when faced with the most devastating external event, the collapse of his known world, discovered that the only lasting peace, the only armor that truly protects against existential pain, is found paradoxically within himself. This is the story of how a shattered soul used the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, not to become cold or indifferent, but to become unbreakable, to turn poison into medicine. This is the lesson of the dichotomy of control applied to the fire of betrayal, the ultimate test of amor fati, the unconditional love of whatever fate brings us, and the illusion of certainty, the sandcastle. The life he had built, his 10-year relationship, was, in his eyes, a masterpiece of emotional engineering, structured, peaceful, predictable down to the smallest detail of their weekends. He had invested his time, his career, his assets, and most importantly, his soul into that connection. Fidelity wasn't just a rule. It was a cardinal value, a stone-solid promise in a liquid world of fleeting commitments. They didn't just share a mortgage, they shared a private language, a future planned down to the color of the curtains in old age. A life woven with thousands of threads of mutual trust. And that was where his vulnerability lay. He had fallen into the fundamental error of oikeiosis, the natural attachment to what is close to us, taken to a neurotic extreme. He had extended his identity into the existence of the relationship itself. His peace, his self-esteem, his very definition of success depended entirely on an external indifferent, the will, the choices, and the behavior of another person. Without realizing it, his happiness was an exact replica of his partner's. If she was there, he was secure. If she was gone, he would disintegrate. He had ignored Epictetus's warning to treat everyone we love as something on loan, that our partner, our children, our friends are merely vessels fortune grants us for a time, and that at any moment fate may reclaim its property. He had forgotten that his only true possession is his prohoresis, his faculty of choice, his moral purpose, and in an instant, all those years of supposed security vanished. The collapse of pathos, the battle of impressions. The discovery was not a dramatic explosion, but a cold, slow drip of truth painfully extracted from emails, text messages, and suspicious silences. A truth that, once fully revealed, burned his known world to the ground. The first impact was not anger, but paralyzing, existential shock. The feeling that not only had he been lied to about the past, but that reality itself, his memory, his perception of the last few years, had been completely falsified. In this abyss, Stoicism becomes either a steel lifeline or a cruel mockery. How can a philosophy of reason respond to such visceral pain? He experienced pathos in its purest and most destructive form, an excessive, irrational emotion that stole his sleep, his appetite, and his ability to concentrate. His mind became a constant battlefield, replaying and editing the scene of betrayal over and over like a horror film he couldn't turn off. These mental images, these intrusive impressions are what the Stoics called fantasiae, automatic judgment screaming, "This is unfair. She ruined me. My life is over." He blamed himself. He blamed fate. and he fell into the greatest mistake, believing his happiness and worth had been destroyed by another person's actions. The physical pain was real: tightness in his chest, endless insomnia, nausea. His body, ruled by pathos, was crying out. The saving distinction, the dichotomy of control. In the middle of that chaos, as he felt his sanity slipping, he remembered Epictetus's first great lesson, the foundational tool every Stoic must wield in adversity, the dichotomy of control. He forced himself in the most painful way to draw the line, not in the sand, but in the living fire of his pain, between what was internal and what was external. He sat in the stillness of the night, not to think, but to write and reason. What was external and uncontrollable? His partner's actions, the lie, the betrayal, her reputation, the past, her decision to leave or return, the physical pain in his body. All of that was on loan from fortune, not his external indifference. What was internal and controllable? His judgment about the event, his reaction, his character, his ability to rise, his dignity, the honesty with which he would face the situation, the choice of his attitude. The betrayal, he told himself, is not the suffering. The suffering is my judgment about the betrayal, the irrational judgment that it should not have happened, that he didn't deserve it, that life without that relationship was unbearable. A judgment that enslaved him to a past event he could no longer change. The distinction hit like a hammer. Her act was her moral error. Holding on to rage would be his. She had lost her virtue by lying. He would not lose his through imitation or revenge. Freedom was not in forgiveness. It was in ceasing irrational judgment. Seneca's shield, premeditatio malorum. The second great battle was against the uncertain future, the fear of loneliness, of gossip, of emptiness. An uncontrolled mind projected a future of endless misery. So he armed himself with Seneca's most ruthless and liberating technique, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, he forced himself to visualize not just the worst-case scenario, but to live with it in detail, to smell it, to feel it. What's the worst that can happen if I strip away the drama? I could lose my home. My social circle could fracture. People might gossip about my failed marriage. I might spend the rest of my life alone. By facing these ghosts with reason, stripped of dramatic imagination, he removed their power to paralyze him. If I lose my home, my resourcefulness and my capacity to work, my virtues will help me rebuild it. A man's value is not in his roof. If I lose friends, I will find new ones who value my character. What is internal, not my status or money? If people gossip, that is an external indifferent. Their words are just air. They do not touch my soul or my proheresis. And if I am alone, that gives me the freedom to work on my virtue without distraction. Loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of virtue. This practice was not masochism. It was immunization. By living daily with the worst possible loss, fear stopped being a terrifying future and became a tolerable present fact. He no longer feared pain. He understood it as the necessary fuel for strength, for the Stoic virtue of courage, tested only in adversity. Adversity is the harshest but most honest teacher. The four virtues in crisis. Stoicism did not ask him to be a robot. It asked him to be a moral warrior. The battle against infidelity was fought by applying the four cardinal virtues to grief and rebuilding: fortitude, courage, and resilience. Fortitude was not confronting his partner or the third party. It was facing the pain without anesthesia, sitting with the open wound and refusing easy escapes: alcohol, obsessive self-pity, public drama. Courage meant getting up every morning, going to work, smiling when he didn't want to, not out of hypocrisy, but because that action was the manifestation of his unbreakable proheresis. Every day he did not surrender to despair was a victory. Temperance, moderation and self-control. Temperance was restraining the impulse for revenge. The temptation was enormous to destroy her reputation, send hurtful messages, burn memories. But each time the wave rose, he paused and asked, "Is this action coming from my reason, logos, or from my passion, pathos?" Reason always answered. Revenge would make him a slave to her. If he tied his happiness to her suffering, he remained bound to her. Freedom was letting go of the need for her to suffer. Justice. Justice was not punishing her, but being just toward himself and toward the truth. Was it just to punish himself with endless resentment? No, hatred is self-mutilation. He embraced Marcus Aurelius's maxim and went further. The best revenge is not to resemble your enemy, and even better, not to see them as an enemy at all. She was a flawed human being who chose wrongly. His duty was not to correct her, but to protect his inner temple from the contagion of her error. Wisdom, the master virtue, allowed him to see the betrayal not as an end, but as a beginning. It stripped away an illusion and anchored him in reality. The true failure would not have been the infidelity, but his inability to respond with virtue and reason. Over time, his focus shifted entirely to his inner citadel. He redirected the energy once spent on anxiety toward his own growth. Gossip came, pitying looks, pressure to choose sides. He resisted the urge to explain himself, to seek validation. The Stoics had taught him reputation is the vainest of external indifference. His silence and peace became his defense, his proof of character. Eventually, he realized the relationship had given him comfort that had quietly weakened his self-sufficiency. The external disaster became a disguised gift. The goal was no longer recovery, but apatheia, freedom from destructive passion regarding the betrayal. The memory no longer caused sharp, uncontrollable pain. It became a calm sadness, a simple acknowledgement of a past fact. It was a memory, not a master. Then came the hardest step, amor fati, love of fate. How do you love something so painful? He understood that life does not err in the grand design. The betrayal was not personal punishment, but a necessary piece in the machinery of his evolution. Infidelity accomplished three things 10 years of peace never could. It shattered an illusion and anchored him in reality. It taught him to love himself by grounding his worth in his own virtuous response, not in external approval. It forged him, polishing his strength and wisdom more than a lifetime of comfort ever could. He did not merely survive the betrayal, he integrated it. He accepted that his suffering, his mistaken judgment, had been more destructive than her act. And by releasing that judgment, he freed himself. His final verdict was stoic. The path to eudaimonia was not diverted by infidelity. It was illuminated by it. The love he found at the end was not the immediate love of a new partner, but an unbreakable love for his own virtuous self. And only from that impregnable inner citadel was he ready to love again. This time, he knew love was a free choice of his prohoresis, never a vulnerable necessity. And you, what external event in your life has caused you the greatest pathos? Are you ready to apply the dichotomy of control and transform pain into the virtue nature demands of you? If this reflection resonated with you, subscribe for more stories that turn suffering into wisdom. Like this video and tell me in the comments which of the 4 Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, or temperance, is the hardest to apply when you feel betrayed. If you're interested in Stoicism, personal growth, and life stories, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Join the family of Stoic Stories.